"Ma'am, you didn't finish the course in time, what shocking twist awaits?" the instructor said. "Turn in your badge, report to the armory." Grace Holloway nodded once, no protest, just quiet dignity as she walked away, her dream of becoming a sniper slipping behind her. They called her too slow, too old, said she didn't belong, but weeks later, when a recruit nearly fired at a civilian during a live demonstration, with no radio signal and seconds to spare, she was the only one who saw the danger, and the shot she took didn't just stop a tragedy, it exposed a truth the entire base had ignored. What will happen next? What followed rewrote the rules for every sniper trained after her. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Camp Teller Ridge, Wyoming. The wind rolled down from the ridgelines like a blade, sharp and bitter. Grace Holloway stepped off the transport truck with nothing but a worn canvas duffel and a rifle case that had seen better decades. The bolt action inside had once belonged to her grandfather, carried through the jungles of Vietnam, rebuilt twice, oiled by hand every month since. She stood still for a moment, taking in the concrete walls carved into the rock. Camp Teller Ridge wasn't a place for introductions, it was the military's most unforgiving sniper school, tucked away in the Wyoming highlands like a test no one wanted you to pass. The other candidates didn't hide their curiosity, most were barely 20, fresh from basic, their gear brand new and blinding in the morning sun. One recruit, tall Texan draw clean plate carrier, whistled low when he saw her rifle case. "Who brings a museum piece to sniper school?" Logan Pierce muttered loud enough to carry. A few chuckles followed. "Hey, Grandma, you sure you're not looking for admin?" Grace didn't flinch, she'd heard worse, and replied less. She simply slid the case open, checked the bolt, then tucked the rifle back inside like she was folding away part of herself. They didn't see the notebook in her hand, leather-bound, corners frayed, pages thick with years of wind drift tables, hand-drawn range diagrams, and notes in ink so faded it looked like memory. She had been studying this craft for longer than some of them had been alive. Roll call came quick. Captain Ron Sutter scanned the formation with a clipboard in hand and judgment in his eyes. When he reached her name, he paused. "Holloway, logistics transfer." "Now, Kerr, sir," she answered evenly. "Sniper candidate." There was a long silence, his eyes flicked from her boots to the old fatigues to the scratches on her case. "Right," he said. "Flat and final, we'll see." That was day one. Day two was the briefing. Sutter's voice rang out like a commandment. "Speed is everything at Teller Ridge. Fast acquisition, fast decisions, fast kills." Behind him, the motto stretched across the wall in bold black paint. "First shot, fast shot, last shot." Grace said nothing, but something inside her bristled. She knew another truth, one her grandfather had taught her quietly: precision saves lives. By day 3, the testing began. 12 shooting lanes, targets from 100 to 800 yards, 60 seconds per shot. Missed the timer, failed the stage. Grace unpacked her rifle with reverence. The bolt action was smooth, the woodstock oiled, the scope simple. No rangefinder, no thermal, just calibrated glass. It wasn't fast, but it was hers. Logan Pierce was 3 targets ahead before she'd even fired her second round. His semi-auto barked quick, aggressive, chewing through the sequence. She took her time, adjusting for crosswind, tracking the flags with her peripheral vision. Every bullet she fired hit dead center, but when the whistle blew, she was still lining up her final shot. It landed true, a clean bullseye. 2 seconds too late. Captain Sutter walked the line with Sergeant Don Bishop, the range master. When they reached her targets, Bishop let out a quiet exhale. "Damn near perfect grouping." Sutter didn't blink, but she didn't finish. "Her regulations are clear." He raised his voice. "Holloway, outstanding precision, but you failed to complete the course." Pierce passed. He had 2 misses, one wide left, one off target entirely, but he beat the clock. "Callahan, passing score." Sutter barked. "Speed's what matters out there." The barracks that night were colder than the wind. Grace found a slip of paper folded on her bunk. "Reassignment orders, effective immediately." No meeting, no second chance, just a quiet dismissal printed on unofficial letterhead. She stared at it for a long time, her hand motionless over the crease. Then she folded it once more and tucked it inside her notebook. A blank space waited beneath the day's wind notes. She wrote just 6 words: precision over speed, every single time. The next morning, she reported to the armory. "Master Sergeant Bishop barely looked up from his desk. "You're the one they bumped down here. Sniper washout yet, sir?" she said quietly. He nodded toward the racks. "Well, let's see if you know how to clean these faster than their owners break them." Then, after a pause, he added, "Some of these kids couldn't hit a parked truck with a GPS, keep that in mind." And so began the silence, days filled with cleaning, calibrating, logging, firing issues the recruits never noticed. They called her the cleaning lady. Pierce liked to toss that one around with a grin. Grace never reacted. She just cleaned their rifles better than they knew how to shoot them, and in doing so, she started to see the cracks in their scopes, in their groupings, and in the system. She logged every pattern: triggers too tight, scopes misaligned, barrels worn from overcompensation, and one troubling consistency under stress: the fast ones missed more than anyone wanted to admit. From her quiet seat in the back of the base, she watched the gears Of the machine's spin on Logan Pierce became the golden boy, Captain Sutter turned a blind eye to the reports, but Grace, the one they dismissed, demoted, and ignored, kept turning the pages of her notebook, each line written in silence, each calculation another whisper against the noise. What she saw, what she recorded, would one day change everything, but for now, she stayed where they put her, invisible, underestimated, and paying very close attention. Can you imagine the impact of her quiet work? At Camp Teller Ridge, silence could stretch longer than any rifle barrel. Grace Holloway worked quietly in the armory, her days filled with solvent, steel, and scribbled notes that never left her side. Most thought she was invisible, and for the most part, she let them. Each evening after the last recruit had dropped off their gear, she opened her notebook, not just to track wind drift anymore. Now she was logging patterns, failings no one wanted to talk about. Logan Pierce's rifle always came in hot from the range, still reeking of burnt powder. She noticed it first in the trigger pull, inconsistent compression, then in the scuff marks along the chamber lip, signs of rushed reloads under stress. He'd scored high again that week in timed exercises, but when Grace reviewed the armory's logged fire pattern data, something didn't sit right. In stress simulations, Pierce's groupings expanded drastically, drifting 6 to 8 in left under pressure. It wasn't just him, other recruits praised for their speed showed sharp performance drops during live fire drills that simulated combat noise and confusion. They hit fast, but too often, not well. One rifle had a cracked scope mount, another had barrel drift from improper cleaning. Grace corrected each one silently, no thanks, no notice, but she started keeping detailed records, not just of weapon condition, but shooter profiles, wind speed, humidity, trigger response, emotional tells in the way the bolts were racked. It was a language only she seemed to read, and after a month in the shadows, the story it told was troubling. Camp Teller Ridge was training speed but forgetting precision. She compiled the patterns into a formal report, pages of data cross-referenced against the base's secure range logs. She didn't include opinion, only facts, measurable, repeatable, irrefutable. Then she slipped it into a sealed folder and left it in Captain Sutter's inbox. No name on the front, no plea for attention, just the evidence and a quiet hope someone would care enough to read it. 3 days passed, no reply. But Grace noticed the change. Sutter began coming into the armory unannounced. Once he checked her workstation, flipping through tool drawers without a word. Another time, he caught her off guard by standing behind her in silence, watching her recalibrate a scope. Finally, one afternoon, he closed the door behind him. You've been accessing range logs, he said. It wasn't a question, they're linked to the weapons I maintain. She replied calmly, I need them to track performance issues. He stepped closer. You don't have clearance for analysis, you're a tech. Holloway, stay in your lane. She held his gaze without defiance, just clarity. I'm not analyzing people, sir. I'm identifying patterns and precision degradation under stress that affects safety. Sutter's voice dropped to a low growl. You think these kids aren't ready, that they'll fold in real combat? Who are you to make that call? Grace didn't answer, not because she lacked a reply, but because arguing with someone who wouldn't listen was a waste of oxygen. You're done, he said, tapping the side of her notebook. No more logging candidates, no more unofficial reports. Next time I find one, you'll be reassigned to latrine duty. That clear? She nodded once, then watched him leave, the door swinging shut with finality. The silence afterward felt heavier than any weapon. That night, she didn't write. She sat on her bunk, staring at the wall, but the next morning, she opened the notebook again. If the system wouldn't listen, she'd still see it through, because when something's wrong, silence isn't the same as consent, it's just the calm before a reckoning. She didn't know someone else had started to notice. Colonel Hannah Whitaker, base commander of Teller Ridge, had never spoken to Grace, but one evening, passing through the armory on her way to an equipment inspection, something caught her eye. A notebook left open by mistake, or perhaps not, beside a half-disassembled tactical sniper rifle. It was turned to a page comparing fire group deviations under noise stress simulations. Colonel Whitaker studied the page for a long time, then looked around. The armory was empty, save for Master Sergeant Don Bishop, who entered moments later with a clipboard. Whose notes? She asked. Bishop hesitated. Specialist Holloway's. She's meticulous. Whitaker closed the notebook gently. Bring her to my office tomorrow. First thing. The next morning, Grace walked into the commander's office expecting reprimand, maybe worse. Instead, Whitaker gestured to a chair and asked her one question: what are we missing? It was the first time anyone had asked. Grace opened the same notebook they'd all dismissed and began to explain, not with emotion, not with bitterness, just data, logic, and real concern. She showed her notations, how precision dropped significantly once live combat stressors were introduced, how rifles returned with signs of force manipulation and misalignment. They passed the speed drills, Grace said, voice quiet but firm. But out there in real combat, there's no timer, just consequences. Whitaker said nothing at first. Then she reached for a nearby tablet, typed in a command, and pulled up internal shooting logs. Grace wasn't even supposed to have seen it together. They cross-referenced her findings: target drift, reaction time under auditory pressure, missed shots disguised by carefully designed drills. When they finished, Whitaker leaned back slowly, her eyes didn't leave Grace's. You've just diagnosed a sickness we didn't know we had. Grace nodded. I'm not trying to prove anyone wrong, ma'am, I just don't want anyone getting hurt because no one slowed down long enough to see what matters. Whitaker's jaw tightened, not with anger, but something closer to resolve. You'll continue this analysis, she said, effective immediately. You report your findings directly to me. Grace blinked, not out of fear, but something quieter, relief. Someone finally saw it, not the numbers, not the scores, but her. The woman no one watched was now watching everything, and behind the notebook, behind the silence, a new shift had begun, because when someone with power chooses to listen, even whispers start to echo. Can you believe her quiet strength? Camp Teller Ridge woke before dawn that morning. The air was crisp, the ridgelines cut sharp against the sky, and the base buzzed with something more than cold. A convoy of black vehicles rolled through the front gate just after 0600. General Patricia Monroe had arrived. With her came 2 Pentagon officials, a half-dozen aides, and 1 embedded reporter. They were here to witness the future of sniper warfare. Faster, smarter, streamlined. The drill had been rehearsed for weeks. Recruits would showcase time target engagements. Precision, though still required, had quietly become a second priority. Logan Pierce stood at the center of it all, chosen to represent the program, the golden boy with the fastest times, the sharpest tongue, and the loudest confidence. From the armory window, Grace Holloway watched the display unfold. She wasn't invited. Her orders were to remain at her post. Still, she cleaned. She'd been working on Pierce's rifle that very morning. There had been a subtle feeding issue in the bolt, one that could jam under rapid fire. She'd fixed it, tested it twice, but something still nagged at her. The morning went smoothly at first. General Monroe nodded her approval after each sequence. Remarkable speed, she commented to the reporter beside her. But then came the final exercise, the stress drill meant to simulate combat chaos. Smoke machines, sirens, shifting wind from hidden fans, everything designed to replicate the confusion of war. Grace stood near the maintenance bay, her spotting scope propped beside her cleaning bench. Old habits die hard. She liked to see what others missed. At first, the chaos was controlled. The targets popped up, recruits engaged, the crowd clapped at Logan's rapid-fire sequences. But then something changed. A gust of real wind pushed a smoke cloud too far. One of the pop-up systems glitched. A target appeared. Not at the program 300 yards, but 600, and it wasn't marked with the bright training orange. It looked real, too real. Grace adjusted her scope. Her heart sank. 50 yards behind that unmarked target, a maintenance tech was checking a power line. Unaware he'd wandered into the danger zone, she reached for the comms radio. Static. Part of the simulation included jamming primary frequencies. Realism, they called it. She tried the emergency backup. Dead. Through the glass, she watched Logan shift positions. He spotted the target. He didn't see the tech behind it. His rifle came up, finger on the trigger. The crowd watched, thinking it was all part of the show. Grace moved. She picked up her rifle, the old bolt action, the one everyone mocked. No laser rangefinder, no auto-adjusting scope, just glass, wind, and experience. From her window to Logan's position, 340 yards, angle slightly downhill. Target his rifle's receiver, the only shot that could stop him without causing injury. Her breathing slowed, heart matched the rhythm she'd trained into muscle memory. Through her scope, she saw Logan's finger begin to tighten. She fired. The crack was sharp, singular. It cut through the simulation noise like a blade. Logan's weapon sparked and jolted sideways. His shot went wide, striking empty dirt. The tech behind the target looked up, finally realizing what he'd walked into. Every head turned. General Monroe stood from her seat. Who just fired? Captain Sutter fumbled for his radio. I don't know, that wasn't part of the drill. Logan stared at his weapon, stunned. The receiver had been struck dead center, clean hit, disabling the firing mechanism without harming him. Grace stepped out of the armory. She didn't hurry. She walked across the gravel with steady, unbroken steps. Every eye turned to her. The misfit in worn boots, the woman once sent to clean rifles. She stopped at the edge of the range. Ma'am, she said, addressing General Monroe directly. There was a safety breach. A civilian was in the line of fire. I intervened. Captain Sutter stepped forward, face flushed. That was unauthorized. She wasn't even cleared it. Colonel Whitaker arrived at that moment, calm and composed. She had clear line of sight. She prevented a tragedy. She did what had to be done. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It roared. Logan still stood in shock. His rifle hung limp in his hands. He looked at Grace, not with anger, but confusion, maybe fear. General Monroe stepped closer. You hit his rifle from where? Grace pointed to the armory window, 340 yards, crosswind from the left, 6-mile breeze. Why the receiver? It was the only shot I could take that would stop him without hurting him. Monroe turned to Sutter. She just prevented a live fire accident under pressure without orders and with total control. What part of your program teaches that? Sutter didn't answer, because he couldn't. Colonel Whitaker placed a hand lightly on Grace's shoulder. This is Specialist Holloway, she said to the group. She's been logging performance patterns for weeks, quietly, accurately, an aide whispered something to the general. She nodded. I want a full review of the training protocol, effective immediately. Grace didn't smile, she didn't flinch, she just stood there, rifle slung over her shoulder. Notebook still in her jacket, not triumphant, not proud, just certain. The woman they called too slow had just moved faster and wiser than anyone else, and not with noise, with one bullet, one truth, one moment that couldn't be ignored. Will this change everything? The report landed on the Pentagon desk 3 days after the shot. By the end of the week, General Stratton, head of advanced training programs, issued a directive effective immediately. The sniper curriculum at Camp Teller Ridge was to be overhauled top to bottom. They called it the Adaptive Precision Initiative. It was built not from a theory or a lab model, but from a single shot made by someone the system had written off. Grace Holloway didn't ask for a ceremony, didn't stand in front of cameras. She went back to work. This time though, the nameplate outside the armory had changed. Chief Instructor, Adaptive Marksmanship Division. She said nothing about it, she just unlocked the door and got to work. The first class under the new program started a month later. 12 candidates, mixed backgrounds, mixed expectations. Some had washed out under the old program, others were new, drawn by word of mouth about the woman who stopped a bullet from landing in the wrong place. Grace met them the way she met everything: calm, quiet, precise. They didn't do time drills on day one, they studied weather patterns, they measured wind drift by hand, and on the wall of the range, where the old motto had once been painted, fast shot, first shot, last shot, a new phrase had been stenciled in bold, steady strokes. Right shot, right time, every time. Some instructors resisted, said it would make the recruits soft, said hesitation kills, but results began to tell a different story. Under the new model, candidates showed better judgment. They didn't just hit fast, they hit smart. One of them was Logan Pierce. He'd asked to retake the course, requested Grace by name. The swagger was gone. In its place, notebooks, questions, and late-night study under the lamp in the barracks hallway. He still had speed, but now it was guided by something steadier. Grace never said, "I told you so." She reviewed his form like anyone else, and when he nailed a moving target through variable crosswind, she simply nodded once. "You read the flags," she said. Logan exhaled, "Like you showed me," but the proof didn't arrive until 6 months later from thousands of miles away. Lieutenant Emily Rodas had been part of Grace's second class, young, often overlooked, the kind of recruit who got labeled as quiet, which usually meant forgettable. She'd nearly been dropped in her third week, struggled under pressure, but Grace saw something in the way she processed problems, not fast, but thoroughly. So Grace stayed after hours, taught her how to slow her breath before a shot, how to log variables in the margins of a notebook no one else read. Emily listened, took every lesson to heart, and in a dusty alley in Helmand Province, it all came back. She was overwatched for a civilian evacuation. A hidden shooter took aim at a group of Afghan children running across the street. In that moment, smoke, screaming, dust, she had a single second to react. She didn't rush, she read the wind and delivered one shot, clean and exact. 3 children survived that day, because Emily had waited half a second longer, because she trusted what Grace had taught her. The message came through secure military channel, just a line typed into Grace's inbox: "Ma'am, today your training saved lives. I waited, I hit the shot that counted, thank you." Grace didn't show it to anyone. She folded the printed message into the back of her notebook and placed it next to a photo of her grandfather, the man who once told her, "Being slow isn't a weakness, being careless is." By now, stories of Grace's program were spreading beyond Teller Ridge. Other bases requested her methods. Military journals published her analysis under the title "Precision Under Pressure," a modern doctrine. But she still walked the halls the same way, still wore the same faded boots, still preferred the armory quiet to any parade. One afternoon, General Stratton himself visited the base, not with a team, not with cameras, just one aide and a notebook. He watched a full exercise. No one missed a civilian marker, no one rushed a shot and lost their rhythm afterward. He pulled Grace aside. "You've built something that lasts," he said. She shrugged. "It's not mine, sir, it's what always should have been." He smiled. "Then you're the one who remembered it." As the sun dipped behind the Wyoming peaks, Grace stood alone on the range. The flags danced in the wind like they always had, but this time no one rushed to shoot before reading them. A young cadet approached quietly. "Ma'am," he asked, "how do you know when it's time to fire?" Grace looked out across the valley. "It's never about the clock," she said, "it's about the moment. You'll know." And that was enough. The woman they once called too slow, the one assigned to sweep floors, clean bolts, and stay out of the way, had rebuilt a system from the inside out without ever raising her voice, without demanding credit. She just saw what mattered and waited for the right moment to make it count. Years from now, no one may remember her name, but every soldier trained in her method will carry her legacy into every shot they take, and on every wall where that new motto is painted, "Right shot, right time, every time," there will be a quiet echo of the woman who taught them what that really means. Grace Holloway never wanted the spotlight, she wanted truth and safety, and the kind of excellence that doesn't need applause. And in the quiet spaces between war and peace, her voice still carries, not through speeches, but through every life saved because someone took their time and Made the shot that truly mattered. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition, some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.